was her first offence. She only tweeted it once.
We're in a position now where we're running out of prison places. Yeah. So what on earth are the authorities doing here?
We spoke about the fact that Hugh Edwards wasn't going to prison for the pedophilic images that he had downloaded.
Lucy Connolly, you've pleaded guilty to the offence of distributing material with the intention of stirring up racial hatred. You used the social media platform, then known as Twitter, to publish the following, quote, "Mass deportation now. Set fire to all the hotels full of the for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it." The sentence on count 1, therefore, is one of 31 months' imprisonment.
Such, then, is the fate of 41-year-old Lucy Connolly, a former childminder and wife of Tory councillor Raymond Connolly. Does Lucy Connolly deserve her fate?
Well, look, I mean, the elements of the crime are that she intended to stir up hatred, and that's either by posting it or by pictures, words, music. And look, she pleaded guilty. So she admitted that her intention was to stir up hatred. And what the judge would have done is look at the sentencing guidelines. And the starting point, he would have decided there's two factors here. First of all is what culpability there was and what harm there were. And the two I think that the judge looked at in terms of culpability is that she intended to do it. That makes it a high culpability. And the second thing is harm. And the comments could have endangered people's lives. Setting fire to hotels would have endangered people's lives. So I think it would have been category 1 in terms of sentencing. The starting point would have been 3 years. And then the judge will look at two other things, aggravating and mitigating factors, before deciding to sentence. And they would have been, in this case, I think the timing of the offence made it aggravating. There's currently quite a high degree of tension in our community against asylum seekers. I think that would have impact on the judge's reasoning to give that sentence.
And if you need further details on those aggravating factors?
When you published those words, you were well aware of how volatile the situation was. As everyone is aware, that volatility led to serious disorder in a number of areas of the country where mindless violence was used to cause injury and damage to wholly innocent members of the public and to their properties. Your message was widely read. It was viewed 310,000 times, with 940 reposts, 58 quotes, and 113 bookmarks. By the time you were arrested on the 6th of August of this year, you had deleted the account. The police were, however, able to trace other tweets that you had sent both before and after the 29th of July, which included further racist remarks. On the 5th of August, the day before you were arrested, you sent a WhatsApp message which included, quote, "Raging tweet about burning down hotels has bit me on the arse, LOL," which is commonly understood to mean laugh out loud. You also messaged that if inquiries of you were made, you would deny you were responsible for the message, and if you were arrested, you would, quote, "play the mental health card," quote. I have to apply the Sentencing Council guidelines for this offence. In relation to your culpability, this is clearly a Category A case, as both prosecution and your counsel agree, because you intended to incite serious violence.
Did she?
Now, another comment/question that I've seen floating around is that surely she didn't really intend to incite this violence. Surely it was just a tweet in anger. Surely it was just an off-the-cuff comment. But coming back to what the judge said here at paragraph 12, in relation to your culpability, this is clearly a Category A case, as both prosecution and your counsel agree, because you intended to incite serious violence. Now, just pausing on that point for a moment. Those that might believe that it was just an off-the-cuff comment and she didn't really mean it and it was just posted in anger and haste and so on, it would be incumbent on defence counsel, if the defendant did not agree that they intended to incite serious violence, to make the argument that this is not a Category A case.
Well, it sounds like Mrs. Connolly screwed herself over. She pled guilty instead of giving herself a chance to fight her case, and she admitted to intention. Crazy, I say, but then who am I? That said, I'm not the only one who thinks that.
First of all, a lot of people were advised to plead guilty so that this would be dealt with quickly, and I think that they may rue the day, because those who actually have pleaded not guilty and tried to fight it have actually found that they eventually were let off, including the person who was accused of sowing misinformation about who had committed the Southport offences. But she, with the advice of the Free Speech Union, said not guilty, and eventually, having had police raids and being totally humiliated in the public square, the police didn't pursue it.
That commentator is talking about Bernadette Spofforth, a businesswoman from Cheshire.
What was it like when suddenly 3 police vans are outside your house? What did they do? Knock on the door and say, have you been tweeting?
Yeah, actually it had been going on for a few days before that. When they arrested me and they took me to the cells, they told me that I would be held and taken to magistrates in the morning and held on remand. Now, I hadn't seen the news, and I didn't see the news then whilst obviously I was in that cell. So I had no idea they were fast-tracking people through the courts. All I knew about remand was, if you're on remand, you could be there for months.
So after 36 hours, they finally let you out, and then you're facing the possibility of them charging you and then going to jail like other tweeters and other Facebook users did. And I worked it out today. I think for 1 month and 10 days, you had to deal with that before they finally came to their senses and said no further action.
If I had been charged, I would have fought like a banshee because I knew I hadn't done it.
It turns out that even if Mrs. Connolly hadn't admitted to intention, and in fact, even if she hadn't pleaded guilty in the first place, there are other important principles relating to the laws against incitement which would have seriously harmed her case anyway.
Free speech isn't free. There is a cost, and it depends how much you can afford to pay.
A person is liable for incitement even when their incitement has been wholly unsuccessful. In other words, even when nobody has taken the blindest bit of notice of it. As long as it's proven beyond reasonable doubt that the incitement was capable of causing others to commit a crime, the person doing the inciting is screwed, quite frankly. By screwed, I of course mean criminally liable. Given this, where the matter of Mrs. Connolly's criminal liability is concerned, there's no point in us asking whether her tweet actually did lead anyone to commit a crime.
I'd like to see the proof that this actually led to anyone doing anything wrong. There seemed to be a kind of leap here of people assuming that just because people posted stupid things on social media, that had a consequence, which was terrible behaviour by other people. I don't know whether the prosecution was able to prove that to be the case.
No one needs to have acted on Mrs. Connolly's incitement for Mrs. Connolly to have criminal liability. We can, however, ask whether it should be the case that a person is liable for incitement when nobody has actually acted on the incitement. In such cases, why is punishment needed? We can also question whether the right to free speech, also known as freedom of expression, should retain its current restrictions, whose effect is, of course, that
free speech isn't free.
A person, for example, has no lawful entitlement to incite racial hatred or to incite violence. These then being two of the restrictions on the right to freedom of expression. There are, of course, further restrictions too. We may then consider whether this right should, in fact, be made an unrestricted and absolute right. Let people speak their mind, for crying out loud. Why? Because it's just speech or writing.
People are always posting daft and offensive and vile things on Twitter, and they don't go to jail for years, and quite rightly not, because, you know, it's words, isn't it? And yeah, words matter a bit, but they don't matter that much, mostly.
There's still another aggravating feature to Mrs. Connolly's case as well.
In relation to harm, it's again agreed correctly that what you did encouraged activity which threatened or endangered life and therefore falls within category 1.
But doesn't a punishment have to be proportionate to the crime, with due consideration being given to mitigating factors? If so, are those two principles truly reflected in Mrs Connolly's sentence?
The last time I was on your show, we spoke about the fact that Hugh Edwards wasn't going to prison for the paedophilic images that he had downloaded. There's something seriously wrong with the criminal justice system in this country if it is not sending paedophiles to prison, but it is sending people who post things on Facebook for a couple of hours and then take it down to prison for 31 months.
Yeah. I mean, 31 months, whatever way you slice it, is a long time in jail.
It is a very long time, and of course it comes in at a time when we have thousands of prisoners being released early after serving just 40% of their sentence, their jail sentence.
We're in a position now where we're running out of prison places. Yeah. So what on earth are the authorities doing here?
I think the mitigating factors were, it was her first offence. She only tweeted it once.
I believe there's a crisis in the prison system. There is a crisis in the prison system. Therefore, you have to ask yourself the question, is this the best use of a prison space to put Lucy Connolly away?
And the punishment of the people who rioted, some of them got less. I'll show you Stacey Vint. Now, you may say Stacey Vint shouldn't be in prison. This Stacey Vint here, she wheels a smoking wheelie bin at the police and then falls flat on her face herself. She got 20 months for violent disorder.
We're talking about, yes, there are many of those who haven't served time for violent offences, but there are some who have served time for violent offences who are being released onto the street. Now, you can send somebody to prison for a number of reasons. Retribution. Yep. You can send them as a deterrent, and in this case, Lucy Connolly, I think, has got the 31 months from the judge, because the judge is trying to say to others who might be tempted to make similar tweets, don't do this because look what can happen. But the most important reason for sending somebody to prison is public safety, to keep the public safe because of what they might do. Now, I absolutely abhor what Lucy Connolly said in that tweet, but she is not a threat to public safety as of right now.
It is true, say some people of law, that those being convicted of riot-related offences are being punished more severely than they would have been if they had committed the offence in normal times.
So far, 460 people accused of being involved in the disorder have faced justice. Today, some of this Sky News footage from the riots in Whitehall was shown at Inner London Crown Court. Among those sentenced here was 22-year-old Charles Smith, who pleaded guilty to a fray.
The court was showing footage of Smith, and he was being threatening, raising his fists, shouting at the police, calling them scum, but there was no actual violence. Still, he was sentenced to 23 weeks in prison. His barrister told me afterwards, in normal circumstances, it would have been a suspended sentence.
A suspended sentence? Oh, come off it. A police caution would have been enough if the guy had to be punished at all. I'm a black person. The tweet made by Mrs. Lucy Connolly was offensive towards me. Even I don't think she should be in prison. I actually don't think she should even have been arrested. If you've enjoyed this video, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll see you there.